Welcome to Alaska EdVenture, hosted by Dr. Meinert, Superintendent of the Fairbanks North Star Borough School District. This award-winning podcast is your gateway to the heart of Alaska's educational landscape. In each episode, we'll explore the unique perspectives of guests who are shaping education in the last frontier. Join us on Alaska EdVenture as we share the insights and inspirations found in Alaska's K-12 classrooms.
Welcome back to the Alaska EdVenture podcast. This is Dr. Luke Meinert, Superintendent of the Fairbanks North Star Borough School District. And today I have the pleasure to do a podcast with two of our very best educators at West Valley High School here in Fairbanks, Alaska. And we're going to be talking about Black History Month. We're just finishing up the month of February, which is Black History Month. And Mr. Blackburn, who I'll have introduce himself in just a second, said, wouldn't it be a great idea to have a podcast on Black History Month? And I said, absolutely. And so I'm very excited to host this podcast today. It's a great honor of mine and can't wait to host this podcast in the future with African-American leaders here in Fairbanks. So Mr. Blackburn, could you introduce yourself and what you do here at West Valley High School?
Sure. Willie Blackburn. I'm a school counselor, high school counselor. I've been counseling for 25 years here in this district. Actually, I've been here, basically, I can say I'm homegrown. Came up here when I was 15 years old. So here it is, 50 years being in Alaska. Came up here, Dad was military, so that's how that transition happened for being up here.
All right. Well, Fairbanks is blessed to have you and very fortunate that you're giving back in the ways that you are. How about you, Heather?
So I'm Heather Damario. I've been here since my family moved up here July 4th, 1989. And I remember that date because we came up here with the military as well. But we came from Washington, D.C. area. And on July 4th, you all had no fireworks. And so that was kind of a big deal for me and my siblings where when you're in Washington, D.C., the fireworks are... And the program for July 4th is amazing. So, yeah, I've been here since then. I have 4 kids and my husband, and I'm one of 10 kids. My parents still live here in Fairbanks. They retired here out of the military. And actually, I've known Mr. Blackburn since I was in high school because he started in the district as a safety, right?
Yeah.
He's a safety over at Lathrop. I went to ICS in Monroe, but I graduated from Lathrop.
All right.
Class of 1995.
There we go.
And Mr. Blackburn was a safety there. And then here we are both at West Valley now.
That's great. Full circle. For those that don't know, because we don't have just Fairbanks listeners, why it's funny that there's not fireworks on the 4th of July here in Fairbanks because we have almost 24 hours of lightness. Yeah. So our big fireworks shows usually around the new year and in the winter because it is really dark here in Alaska. And so if you aren't an Alaskan, that's why it's funny that there aren't 4th of July fireworks. Yeah. So how does Black History Month show up here at West Valley? I heard just recently from the principal that there was an amazing luncheon. He was bummed. I had him in a meeting, which I didn't realize. So he missed the luncheon. But I understand there was a great luncheon. But what are some other ways that Black History Month is comes alive here at West Valley High School?
Mm-hmm. Did you want to start? Because you perform in the assembly.
Yeah. And actually, you were part of it, too, as well. Of course, there was the soul food luncheon that we had. And so that's a way of actually just gathering together collectively, that is, of showing in terms of in the community that this is how we celebrate. It's just one aspect of it. And so we also did have an assembly to where that featured some prominent individuals here from the community.
Miss Willa Watts.
Oh, yes.
Yes, our choir sang gospel songs.
Oh, beautiful.
And so she's actually military also. And she's done quite a number of performances here in this community as well. And presently, she's actually doing a part of a play. It's called For Color Girls.
Okay.
So that's happening right now. I'm just doing a little plug for her.
Yeah, absolutely. Go out and check that out.
So, yeah.
And so at the assembly, it's the organization of Miss Carrie Heimer. And she came to me and asked me about it. And I was like, yes, I think it'd be great. So her and I kind of host it. We invite the school and it's by invitation. Or by volunteer. So if kids want to come, they can go. And not everybody has to attend. Mr. Blackburn usually recites a poem. We have singing. We share some quotes and information about prominent African-American artists. Each year there's been a theme for it. So yeah, it's just a really nice way, again, for coming together. It's great to eat the food, but then also be a part of the culture is what's important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do students respond to getting to participate in those types of things?
Oh, they're so energetic. So when students found out that there was going to be the assembly, one student, and she was in her English class when she found out, and she asked if she could recite a poem. And she came in and she recited a poem. She's also in the choir. So when the choir came in and sang, those students are really excited. A lot of them don't even have a class at 7 or an extension class at 7:30 in the morning, which is the period in which we hold the assembly. But they came in for it.
Oh, that's great. And how about the foods? What kind of foods did you have? And was it just you two preparing the foods? Or
Oh, no, it
Oh,
was community effort. So
yes.
from churches, my dad made his cornbread. My sister brought some ribs. Big Daddy's donated. Would they bring in the greens and some ribs and some
awesome.
pulled pork. I did a jambalaya. You
My
did red
wife.
beans? Oh, okay.
Okay, I got to give her
There we
credit
go.
for it, 'cause, yeah, she actually did dirty rice and also some desserts too as well. So this has been our second annual,
Okay.
and so
Yeah, I need to get that on my
last-
calendar next year. I'm hungry right now
You
thinking about
need
it.
to.
Community
and-
effort. Students
Yeah.
come in and serve. Students volunteer to come in and serve once they see all the signs. Yeah, and it's just it's a collected effort, and it's not just one group of students that's volunteering to do it. It's a wide array of students. Some of my students heard it was happening. They're like, "Mrs. Damario, do you need help?" I was like, "Yes, we do." And she stayed there all afternoon serving mac and cheese, all lunch period serving mac and cheese to everybody that came through.
Oh, that's great. Well, let me know when it is next year. I'd love to
of
contribute
course,
both on
of
the
course.
serving side and then
and we
maybe
can
get
put
the
you to work too.
Yeah, absolutely. And then
Yeah.
I'll get the Traeger going. I like doing some ribs or some pulled pork.
We might have to
so-
taste test it first.
Yeah, there we go. Do a couple cycles of it. Make sure it's okay. It can make the cut. So
Yeah.
I like that. So how does celebrating Black History Month contribute to fostering inclusivity and understanding here in the school and in the community?
Well, I'll let you start with that one.
Yeah, one of the things
Mr.
that I think
Martin.
is really important is that in every facet of American history, there is Black history.
Yep.
Like American history is very diverse. However, that hasn't always been taught. The diverse history hasn't been taught.
Yeah.
And so, for example, people can tell you many things about Benjamin Franklin, but they couldn't tell you the same things about Benjamin Banneker, who was
Mhm.
also an almanac maker. He's the one that charted the cycles of the locusts. He helped plan the layout of Washington, D.C. He was a farmer. He was a self-trained astronomer and mathematician. He actually sent his almanacs to Thomas Jefferson, who gave them as gifts to his friends in France. And so when you think about Benjamin Franklin and Benjamin Banneker, they're existing in the same time, but then people don't know Benjamin Banneker, who's
Mhm.
African-American. It's important that people know that alongside all of these great Americans that we talk about, there are also other people of different races that contributed to the story of America. I mean, American history is exciting, it's
Yep.
frustrating, it's energetic at times, it's
Mhm.
sad at times. But in all of those periods, everybody was there. Everybody that is in society now, whatever your ethnicity, they were there.
Yeah. And you're an expert history teacher. I've been in your class several times, and I'm a former
Expert might be a stretch. but
No,
yes.
it is
No,
not. She
It's a
is
good class. It's a
Right
good
about
class.
that.
amazingly humble. I mean, the fact that you're just rattling off like these people that have made major contributions to our history, right?
Yeah.
It speaks to your expertise. But curious, for educators that come into the system and even historians or history teachers that might not be well versed in Black history and being able to highlight the amazing African American individuals we've had within our history. Do you go help them so that they can be well versed and that can show up in their classes as well?
I think over time, teachers have become more cognizant of that and creating a history, or if you're an English teacher, a body of literature
Mhm.
that's more diverse. Just over time, that has happened. But yeah, I've had teachers come to me. I try not to go to them. I only go to them if a student says something.
Yeah.
But generally, like teachers will come to me and ask me. I will mention that it is challenging being one of only a few African American teachers that are in this district, because I have to be the one that answers all of the questions. One of the things that is my concern is that when people say, well, they don't need a Black History Month because they teach it all year, they teach us the Black people always struggling. Like, that's not necessarily Black history. Like, where is your Benjamin Banneker?
Yeah.
Where is your poetry of Phyllis Wheatley in your poetry unit? Just including more people in your content area is what's important and empowering for your students. And so I do answer questions. I can point people to different websites. If they're looking for a certain type of poem and they want to include African American literature that is age appropriate, I'm always happy to assist in that manner to my colleagues.
Yeah, that's great, because I think there are a lot of colleagues out there that might want to do more for Black History Month, but they just don't know where to start. Do you have any resources off the top of your head that you'd like to shout out for them of places to start?
Well, one place to start is just ask.
Yep.
Like, you can just ask. Another place to start is put up a bulletin board.
Yeah.
My TAs put up a bulletin board. And so you can do something very simple. And sometimes it's just a poem or having students reflect on a quote from someone who is like consciously picking a person who is African American as your quote or journal for the day or your short story for the day. That's an easy place to start. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to put out a whole body of literature, do a giant lesson on anything. I think it's just about letting students know that there are other people in history who have influenced the fabric of our nation.
Absolutely. And just putting a focus on it with lessons that you're already doing. You don't have to reinvent the wheel necessarily for things that you're doing, but saying, hey, we're going to focus on this for this assignment.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we were looking at in my history class when we were covering westward expansion, Buffalo Soldiers. They have no idea who the Buffalo Soldiers are. They know the song by Bob Marley, but they don't actually know who the Buffalo Soldiers are. So just including Buffalo Soldiers in our study of westward expansion. It doesn't have to be some big announcement that you're covering Black history or contributions of Black Americans, but it will become part of their fabric and their understanding of our story.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said something, some people make the statement of why do we have Black History Month? And I want to come back to that a little bit. Willie, why do we celebrate Black History Month, and why is it important specifically in schools?
I got to defer back to what Heather was mentioning, that it's American history. That's what it is. And it always has been. The father of Black history, that happens to be Mr. Woodson, who in 1926, it was based on, at that time, doing the history, the research in terms of what we actually have contributed to society. Of course, there was the aspect of the struggle that's evident in terms of the fabric of this nation, how it was built, what it was built on. But then again, there was the accomplishments also. There's a great deal of accomplishment in every aspect, in architecture and medicine. And so Black history within itself, it's not just excluded to Blacks, it's for everybody. And that's one of the misnomers of that. It's just exclusively for Blacks, but it's not. It's to celebrate our accomplishments in ways that that we know that we contributed to society. And like with her, it's you're one of very few Blacks here in this community, especially in the education system, being a counselor. I know that I am probably the fifth, actually, school counselor in this nation, in this city, in this community. And it's my basis of that was that in my family, they've always been educators. They have, or people that actually were within the social realm of medicine and healthcare as well. And so for me, that actually came a little bit like natural.
Mm-hmm.
It's within my blood system. And so for us being where we are right now, that's what it's based on. We want to actually let people know that Black history is about American history.
Mm-hmm.
And also Alaska history too as well, because we made great strides here and contributed within this community.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as well as versed in terms of the history aspect of it,
Yeah.
but I do know in my 50 years here being in Alaska, I can tell you within this community of individuals that I know of that definitely have contributed to making people understand that this is about Alaska,
Mm-hmm.
Blacks, how we contributed to Alaska, how we're celebrating. That's what it is. It's
Mm-hmm.
celebrating.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think you're two wonderful role models for all of our students here at West Valley. I'm curious, do young Black students come up to you and recognize your role within the school?
Yes, and that's another part that is important to note when and I have a lot of students that come to me for all different types of things.
Yeah.
But there's something in having a teacher that looks like you when you are they are also one of a few in the building.
Mm-hmm.
And so they do come to me and talk to me. And it's a way for, I don't know if you've heard the term like code switching,
mm-hmm.
where they are a certain way in their classroom, but when you're around your friends and family and people who understand your culture
Mm-hmm.
and your vernacular, you can let down and relax.
Yeah.
And so then they will come in my room and be able to sit and talk and eat their foods that
Mm-hmm.
might smell a little different or look a little bit different. Like there's a space for them to be themselves and to be able to relax. I would like them to know that there are plenty of places in this building where teachers are accepting of them as they are.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't mind being their go-to.
Yeah,
I don't mind being their go-to. And when they wanted to do a Black History Month bulletin board,
Mm-hmm.
it was me they came to.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to be that person for them, and I will always be there for them.
Yeah, thank you.
So.
And I confirm with that also, in terms of like being the only Black counselor
Mm-hmm.
at this present time in the
Mm-hmm.
district. I knew when I was growing up from New Orleans that in my community, there were Black educators that were role models in ways that in education. And so I can remember one, his name was Mr. Polk. He was about 6'5", and he was so eloquent. He reminded me of Sidney Poitier.
Yeah.
Was always articulate and always would call students. Now, this was when I was in 5th grade, 6th grade, would always refer to as Mr. or
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. at that young age.
Mm-hmm.
And so having that person there to see that, wow, anything is possible,
Mm-hmm.
irregardless. And so when I changed in terms of different environments coming up here, it was a culture shock to me.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And so I didn't see as many that were here, but those that I did see, it made me feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Made me feel good in terms of what I was seeing and what I was hearing. And so here it is. There's about 5 decades of students that since I've been a counselor in the district, that I can say that I've actually had a part in their education, a part in their livelihood. And that makes me feel really good.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go into a store, and I'm sure you have also, you've seen students or parents recognize you,
Yeah.
you know, outside of your own person, outside of your role as an educator, to where they'll say to me, you know what, you had something to do with where I'm at right now. I said, well, I'm glad I was able to actually be a part of that. Okay.
That makes it all worth it. I mean, I know that's why I'm in education, is to make a positive impact on our students, and love that you see that throughout the community, especially given your longevity here at West Valley and other schools in the district. So if you were to name kind of your hero or historical figure looking back, is there one that comes to mind?
There's a lot.
Yes,
there's a lot. One of the first ones that come to mind, though, is Pauli Murray, who was a really good friend of Eleanor Roosevelt. And she used to keep Eleanor Roosevelt up to speed on the things that were important to Pauli. And those things were definitely associated with democracy. She was an activist. She went to Howard University and Yale University. She was denied entry into, I think it was University of North Carolina because she was Black, and then Harvard because she was a woman. And so she just had these challenges that she spent a good portion of her life fighting against. And she's one of the first people I see she's one of the first people I see that also include LGBTQ community in her fight and in her conversation. And that friendship that she had with Eleanor Roosevelt was just, it's not something that's known. Again, it's one of those things that everybody knows who Eleanor Roosevelt is, but Eleanor Roosevelt got a lot of her information from Pauli Murray, and Eleanor Roosevelt used her position of power to help advocate for her friend group. And Pauli Murray was one of those friends. And FDR went and he gave a speech at the University of North Carolina. And Pauli Murray wrote him a letter, and she said, "Oh, so now that you're there speaking at this university, are you also going to make them integrate? Are you?" And she just pushed him and pushed him and pushed him. And she sent the same letter to Eleanor Roosevelt to make sure she gave it to FDR so that he got it. And so that friendship is something that helps push society forward too. But again, everybody knows Eleanor.
Yeah.
Not so many people know Pauli. And then another person that really stands out to me, and I mentioned her earlier, was Phyllis Wheatley. An amazing poet, Revolutionary War era poet, wrote about religion, all kinds of subjects. One of the things that she really advocated for was the Christian community taking in Black people. Black people are Christians too. Like, why aren't you letting Black people go to your churches? Like, she just raised these questions in her poetry. And she wrote letters to George Washington. She was very excited about him becoming the commander-in-chief, but then questioned him on what he was going to do about slavery. So now that you're fighting for this great cause, what are you going to do about slavery? And her and George Washington had this great exchange of letters. Thomas Jefferson, on the other hand, said there's no way that she could have written all that poetry because she was a Black woman, but because it was so good. Yeah, so just Phyllis Wheatley is somebody that really stands out to me in history because of the time period that she was in, and what she represents in challenging the system, but then also sharing her education, her insights with the world. And she published her poems and books and sold very well. So super proud of her.
Yeah. I love how you make history come alive too. I'm like, man, I could just sit here and listen for another 30 minutes about
come to class on Monday.
I need to more often. This is awesome. Willie, how about you?
God, just like with Heather mentioning, there's so many. Two come to mind, actually. Cassius Clay, basically Muhammad Ali.
Yep.
So
had a students do a project on him last year.
Was it? Yeah. In terms of his role against racism and how his religion played a different part, in terms of wanting to exert himself as a person, as a man, to be accepted for who he was. He was basically one of my idols growing up, watching him, in terms of his determination and his resiliency, not just from a physical aspect, because he is one of the greatest in terms of when it comes to boxing, but in terms of the mental aptitude that he had at that time. And how he was so fluent in the way he had spoke. And it was so refreshing to see that. You know, that old saying, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. You know, there was one I wrote down that says, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. I will rise above and just be me. And that's what he was all about. The other person was Maya Angelou.
Okay. I thought you were going to say Frederick Douglass. But Maya's good too.
Frederick also. If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. And that's one of the things that resonate with me. And you do that with an open mind, having a discussion, because not everything is actually going to go accordingly. But you have to gather people around the table and have those conversations. And she was another person that was so fluent in her poeticness, the way she presented things. And it was just like sitting there and just listening to Heather right here. I mean, I can listen to you.
I know, me too. It's beautiful. And I mean, what a powerful message, especially for our youth, right? Be a part of the change. And if things can't change, then part of it's our attitude too, right? Which can influence change as well going forward. So how about some local leaders? Are there any, besides you two, of course, but are there other local Black leaders that we should give shout outs to for their work here in the community?
I got a list.
Yeah. Let's start with you then, Willie.
I got a list.
Yeah.
I got a list, let's see. Oh, yeah.
A literal list. I love it. He came prepared.
I got to do this.
Perfect.
Keep on track.
Yes, sir.
So in terms of in education, I can't forget Virgie King. She was a strong component for Blackness. That's what I refer to it as. Being who you are in terms of the education aspect of it. J.P. Jones. Of course, we have the J.P. Jones Center. He was another individual that was a strong component of...
I'll just say, too, that Virgie King's family is still active in the town.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And also with J.P. Jones, his daughter Gigi, she's in Anchorage. And so they're still around. There are other individuals as well as Ken Dickey. Of course, at Ryan, you have the gym that's named after him. He was... a component that was student-driven for everybody. But his presence was just so enormous. And it's not just by what he said, it's about his actions. He was always there for him. There's Mary Sy. Of course, we have Mary Sy Center. There is...
bringing out the legends.
Yeah, Bernice Aldridge.
He's not leaving anybody for you.
And these were people that had an impact on me and seeing in terms of what they did for this community.
Especially you coming up here at 15. So you
Oh, yeah.
like they helped raise you.
Definitely, for sure. Yes, and it was that respect aspect of we're watching you.
Yeah.
Okay. And we know that's that community thing of that involvement.
Which is amazing to have that personal experience because I know them through buildings and different things that are like named after them. So you know they're highly influential. They've made enormous impacts on people's lives, but you got to live it.
Oh, yeah, definitely for sure. And at the time, it really didn't resonate with me until I got a little bit older in terms of what their contribution was to this community. And to me, to give back to this community based on how they influenced me, it makes me feel so proud about this community because there's a history of it in terms of the impact that Blacks have had in this community. Even your family has been here for a long time too as well, and they've done so much for this community. A lot of things behind the scenes that most people really wouldn't think about in terms of what they've done. There's even my parents too as well. They're my local heroes as well. Martha Nevins, there's Tillman Taylor, who was another educator, special education in this community.
We have a tournament coming up in his honor here in, is it May? Or is it April?
It's in April, yes. And actually,
basketball
come
tournament.
out and check that out.
Yeah. And his influence, my son and my daughter were influenced by him because he was the godfather for my kids growing up. And also his wife, Miss Marguerite, she actually taught my daughter, great math teacher also. So there was that influence. And my son has taken it upon himself to actually continue this tournament in his name.
Wow.
My nephew.
Yes.
To where he's done great things in this community, starting as a young entrepreneur. Robert Kennard, this shout out is to you.
Hosted a Black Business Expo last weekend.
Yes.
Yeah. Got the community together. And you could purchase items there, but sometimes it was just it's just awareness.
Yeah.
Sharing of information, and be surprised that even me being in this community, I didn't know there was that many Black businesses that were here in this community. And just to see that, and just to see the camaraderie that happened within this community to support each other. And it was a means, like we said, we're celebrating in terms of what we've actually accomplished and what we can contribute to this community. And it was open to everybody to attend this event. Anything that we put on, it's open to everybody to attend.
Well, and he's covered a long list.
Did he leave you anybody?
Mine is just my family. My family, like I said, I'm one of 10 kids. My parents moved here in 1989 and retired. My dad likes to go fishing in Valdez in the summers. And we've just built this really strong network within this community. I remember a few years back when my brother had passed away, like all of the people that rallied around my family. I mean, Mr. Blackburn stopped by on his way home. I mean, the people that brought food to my family. It was just a testament to the roots that my parents had set down here for us, because it was people from all around, people I didn't even know, stopping by at my mom's house to, I don't know if you know Mr. Grubis that used to teach here. He stopped by and dropped off some bread. He was like, the door was open. I just went in. And everybody knows where my mom and dad live. And it's just this community has been really good to my family. But again, it's a testament to the outreach that my parents have had in raising us all here. And we all stayed. We're all here.
Yeah.
I have one brother that's not here.
That's awesome. And you mentioned events, and we are at the end of Black History Month for this year, but curious what kind of events do happen throughout the community. And so next year when February comes up, people can keep that in mind. I had not heard of the Business Expo, but would love to attend that.
This was the first time that one happened here.
Actually,
There's
that's
the second year.
Okay, I'm going to be on the lookout for that next year. That seems super exciting.
There's music. I know gospel choirs have done performances. Mr. Blackburn was just in a music celebration. We have plays that have been being put on that celebrate African American history and culture. Talks associated with the university. Professors have hosted events. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things that go on. Janelle Solaire.
There was the Motown that happened this weekend, along with the gospel choir, with Bobby and Eustace. They're from New York. They've actually come up here and put this on for 17 years. And Joe Scott was the individual. She's a great component for support that is of the Black community as well.
Excellent.
And Scott just reminded me of the last name, Mr. Scott.
Everybody
knows Mr. Scott in this community.
Absolutely.
So that's somebody that that most people know in this community. Mr. Scott and his contributions have been amazing. And then we have students too. Alyssa is one of our students, Alyssa Quinton.
Oh, yeah. And actually, she's in this play.
She's in the play that's out. Yeah, she does First Friday art shows. African Americans are active all over this community. So
for sure. And I got to give a shout out to Mrs. Sanderson, Choya Sanderson. She was a long time board member. I think she spent 40 years in the school district. And I have a special place for her in my heart. She was my first board president as a superintendent. And so got to know her really well. And, she's not on the board now, but wish her well if she's listening, because she's an amazing individual and has had a big impact on my life and students' lives here in the district.
Definitely.
Were you here when Miss Wendy Dominique?
No, but I wasn't a part of the district yet, but I know she has an amazing legacy as well as
Definitely, for sure,
a board member. And then she's been back in our schools helping substitute teach, and then also I think
university
the university recruiting teachers up there and students up there, and then
and I see her at her grandkids' basketball games and events.
And has I think a little nonprofit. She's helping tutor our students, and so I mean that woman does not sit still. She's all in for our students here in Fairbanks. So huge shout out to
anybody we miss.
I mean there's a lot more, right? But
because you can't name everybody.
No.
It's the same thing when you're teaching history. You can't include everybody, but you should include somebody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So What's something that we didn't talk about today that we should be talking about when it comes to Black History Month?
I would say something that we should talk about in regard to Black History Month is, I kind of touched on it in the beginning, is that Black history is not just this really sad story of struggle, because then that's only looking at a group of people in relationship to an oppressor.
Yeah.
And that's not the relationship that has always existed. It's been there and it's part of the story, but if you want to tell, you can't tell the entire story. There's not enough time, but you can tell the whole story. And the whole story is that the labor of African Americans has been emotional, it's been intellectual, and it's been physical, and just kind of capturing those when you can, because intellectual achievement is not based on race. You can achieve, if given the opportunity, you can achieve what you want to achieve. And that's, there's been so many educators in African American history, like Mary Bethune is somebody that I have grown to respect, and Ida B. Wells as well, what they contributed to the struggle, but then also the celebration and the courage. So it's those, just as when we study anybody in history, I always ask my students, like, what would you take from them? Like, what is something from this person that if you could piece together your perfect person, what would it be?
Yeah.
And inevitably, you get courage and confidence and intellect and empathy and all of these things and I can find people in history for them to connect to on those things. And so I think making sure those parts of African American history are covered alongside the other story of history that most people know.
Yeah. And it comes in waves also. Someone actually had established something, and it's a baton. That's what it is. The baton is picked up and is passed on to the next person, to the next generation, in order to continue it. For example, like Claudette Collins. She was actually the person that established not giving up her seat on the bus. She was 15 years old, 9 months prior to Rosa Parks actually doing it. And so it was a collaboration, knowing that this young lady was so young at the time and didn't want to actually expose her. You got to take in what that time factor was like back during that day. And so they took it upon themselves, Rosa Parks took it upon herself in order to continue that. And the same thing also when we're talking about Malcolm X, we're talking about Martin Luther King. Those individuals actually had the torch passed to them, and they're passing it on to others.
But you also have to understand too, like how those stories are told. And so there was this story told of Malcolm X being violent, and Malcolm X preached a different story than King, but that didn't make him violent.
Right.
And then we have like Sojourner Truth. There was a version of her poem or speech that came out, and they called it "Ain't I a Woman?" Sojourner Truth didn't speak like that. She was raised in New York, so she didn't have a slave dialect. The speech was written in slave dialect to make her sound like that, but that's not how she really sounds. It was almost in perfect English, the actual speech that she gave. And so why do people tell these stories a certain way? They want to paint people a certain way. And so I would caution people to pay attention to that. Is like, why is this person or group of people being painted this way when that is not, it's likely not accurate. The other thing that I think I'd like to share is the opening of the African American History Museum in Washington, D.C. The first summer that it was open, I got the opportunity to go with two of my students. Their documentary that they produced on Billie Holiday was being featured in the Oprah Winfrey Theater in the African American History Museum.
That's incredible.
And nobody can get tickets into the building. So we got 3 tickets. And a student was there with her mother. And I was like, well, I said, your mother should go. She's obviously here. And the mother said, no way. And so me and my 2 students, Yuki Nagaoka and Sydney Cox, we get the opportunity to tour the museum with it. So crowded. Again, first summer they're opened. And we go through the museum with a fine-tooth comb because we don't know if we're ever going to be back. And we are going through that museum, and it is a very heavy history, even though I teach it, even though we've talked about it, they were in my class. by the time we get to the end, and it's President Obama's inauguration, and there's Michelle Obama's dress, we're exhausted. We are emotionally exhausted hearing and viewing this story. And when we look at each other, they're crying. Like, we all just started crying at the end of the museum because we were just emotionally exhausted. And I think when you actually hear the history of any group of people, like, you can pull the histories out and take them solo, and you hear it, it is an emotional story. And I think that's what's important about Black History Month and celebrating it, is that it is an emotional story that we can find roots and connections to in every part of our day. You're walking down the street, you see something, African-American was probably a part of that. African-American railroad porters, African-American artists, and just making sure that you try to include as many people in your story as is included in American history. We've got to get more integrated as a society.
Beautiful. I love that. And that baton forward. So carrying it forward and to the next generation in the future.
And a lot of that happens too, like through music and television and just trying to make as many connections as you can.
And actually, that part about the baton, it came from a play that I was part of, The Mountaintop.
That was that play?
Yeah, you sure were.
That was it?
Yeah. It's about Martin Luther King's it's fiction, nonfiction mixed together, and about his last 24, 48 hours at the Lorraine Motel, and how an angel had came to him and indicated that your time has come. And he indicated that he had more to do. And so the angel indicated to him that your legacy will live on. You passing this baton, it will continue. And that was probably one of the most powerful plays I was part of. And then also this year was Raising in the Sun. That was really powerful, also about a Chicago family during the time of segregation and how the dynamics of the Black family actually came together, and knowing that around them that there were this society of white folks that were rich and that they wanted a piece of the pie. And how can you get a piece of that pie? But it was a matter of the family dynamics sticking together, regardless of the controversy that they're confronted with. So,
powerful stuff. So
yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your willingness to be on the podcast. Thanks for your willingness to be amazing.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, educators here for our students, and what an amazing example you set for all of our educators throughout Alaska and throughout Fairbanks, and certainly for our students here at West Valley High School. So thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Appreciate you.